There are 32,614 documented rules in the Galactic Council's official guidelines. Rule number 1 through 32,613 are negotiable. Rule number 32,614 is not, never, under any circumstances, follow a Deathworlder home. 3 scientists broke it anyway. Professor Quillnex of the Harmonious Collective had 17 academic degrees, 4 of which were in xenobiology, 3 in comparative species psychology, and 1 in what could only be described as theoretical stupidity, because honestly, what was he thinking? His skin was a pleasant shade of cerulean that flickered to worried magenta whenever someone mentioned insurance premiums or occupational hazards. He had spent 32 years studying Deathworlders from a very safe distance, which is to say several star systems away, using telescopes and second-hand data that other, braver or more foolish scientists had collected before their untimely retirements. Dr. Flixen was his research partner, a creature that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a filing cabinet and given it an anxiety disorder. She had 6 limbs, compound eyes that could see in 19 different spectrums, and an unfortunate tendency to overthink everything. Her species, the methodical processors, were known throughout the galaxy for 2 things: their extraordinary attention to detail and their complete inability to make decisions in under 6 hours. She had been contemplating whether to have tea or coffee for breakfast since the previous Tuesday. The 3rd member of their little expedition of stupidity was Grixel, a young intern who had made the fatal mistake of listing "seeking adventure" on his application form. Grixel belonged to a species that looked remarkably like a ferret wearing a lab coat, which was exactly what he was. His people, the inquiring Whiskers, had discovered space travel by accident, when one of them had wondered what would happen if you pointed a matter displacement device at the sky and pressed all the buttons simultaneously. The answer, as it turned out, was interstellar travel and 3 lawsuits. They were currently hiding in an asteroid field near Earth's moon, having followed a human cargo vessel from the Proxima Centauri trading post. The ship was called the Cleveland Rocks, which made absolutely no sense to any of them, but then again, most human naming conventions seem to involve either extreme patriotism, obscure cultural references, or just random words smashed together. "This is a terrible idea," Flixen announced for the 68th time in the past 2 hours. Her translator chip rendered her clicking mandibles into something resembling coherent speech, though it always added an unnecessary echo for dramatic effect. "Your objection has been noted and logged in the official expedition record," Quillnex replied, not looking up from his scanner array. His color had shifted to determined orange, which historically meant he was about to do something that would require extensive paperwork afterward. "It joins the previous 67 identical objections. I just want it to be absolutely clear that when we're all killed horribly, I told you this was a bad idea." "Nobody's going to be killed horribly," Quillnex said, with the confidence of someone who had never actually met a Deathworlder in person. "We're simply going to observe from orbit, collect some data, and leave before anyone notices we're here." Grixel, who had been suspiciously quiet while examining the ship's supply manifest, suddenly looked up with an expression that could only be described as, "Oh no, I just had an idea." This was, historically, how most disasters began. "What if," he said slowly, his whiskers twitching with excitement, "we didn't just observe from orbit?" "No!" Flixen's color shifted through several shades of alarm, settling on catastrophic purple. "Absolutely not. The rule exists for a reason, Grixel. 32,614. Look it up." "I have looked it up," Grixel said, pulling up a holographic display. "And you know what's interesting? The rule just says, don't follow them home. It doesn't say what to do if you've already followed them home. That's more of a guideline gap, really." "That's not a guideline gap. That's called common sense." "The boy has a point," Quillnex mused, his color shifting to contemplative yellow. We've already technically violated the rule. We might as well collect meaningful data while we're here. For science. For science. For science. Flixen's voice had reached frequencies that were normally reserved for emergency broadcasts. That's what every scientist says right before they become a cautionary tale in training videos. But it was too late. Quillnex had already begun calculating landing vectors. Grixel was practically vibrating with excitement, and Flixen was experiencing what her species called a critical decision paralysis event, which meant she was frozen in place, trying to decide whether to stop them or start updating her will. The planet below them was mostly blue, with swirls of white and patches of green and brown. It looked, Quillnex thought, remarkably peaceful for a death world. He'd read the reports, of course. Class 12 hazard rating. Gravity that could crush most species after prolonged exposure. An atmosphere that was literally on fire for several hours every day, thanks to a nearby fusion reactor they called the Sun. Weather patterns that could transition from calm to catastrophic in minutes. Geological activity that could swallow entire cities. And that was before you factored in the native fauna, which included creatures that could kill you in ways that hadn't even been named yet. And then there were the humans themselves. Oh, the humans. Where to even start with humans? They were bipedal carbon-based life forms with internal skeletons, which was already weird because most sensible species kept their hard bits on the outside, where they could provide actual protection. They had opposable thumbs, forward-facing eyes for predator vision, and brains that had apparently evolved in a constant state of emergency, which explained so much about their behavior. They were classified as persistence predators, which meant they didn't catch prey by being fast or strong. They just kept going. They would chase something for days until it literally died of exhaustion. What kind of evolutionary pressure created that? They healed from injuries that would kill most species. They could survive in temperature ranges that spanned over 100 degrees. They had managed to not only survive, but thrive on a planet that was actively trying to kill them every single day. And somehow, impossibly, they had developed a sense of humor about the whole thing. "Beginning atmospheric entry," Quillnex announced, his hand steady on the controls, despite his color flickering between confident orange and terrified white. "I've selected a landing site in a remote area. According to the scans, it's a region called New Jersey. Very low population density, minimal technological signatures. We should be able to observe completely undetected." This assessment would later be described by Flixen in her official report as so catastrophically wrong, it should qualify as a new form of wrongness. The ship descended through the atmosphere with only minor turbulence, which Quillnex took as a good omen. This was his first mistake. His second mistake was not recognizing that they had landed not in a remote area, but rather in what humans called a shopping mall parking lot, at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. They discovered this approximately 90 seconds after landing, when Grixel opened the external cameras and found themselves surrounded by humans holding up small rectangular devices and pointing them at the ship. Grixel said, which was possibly the greatest understatement in the history of xenobiological research. "We might have a problem. Might have a problem." Flixen's entire body had gone rigid with stress. "We've landed in the middle of a human population center." "Well, technically, we've landed adjacent to a large structure dedicated to commerce and social gathering," Quillnex corrected, still trying to maintain some semblance of scientific detachment. "And look, they're not attacking. They're just standing there, observing, like we're observing them. It's quite cordial, really." "They're recording us on their communication devices," Flixen hissed. "In approximately 6 minutes, this footage will be distributed across their entire planetary information network. In 12 minutes, their military will arrive. In 18 minutes, we'll be either dead or wishing we were dead. Or," Grixel suggested with the unearned optimism of youth, "we could try talking to them. Before either of the senior scientists could stop him, Grixel had activated the external communication system and was waving one of his small paws at the crowd. The humans waved back. "See," Grixel said triumphantly, "they're friendly." Through the cameras, they watched as more humans began arriving. Some were running from the large structure, others were emerging from smaller metal transport vehicles. They formed a loose circle around the ship, maintaining a distance of approximately 20 meters, which Quilnex's tactical analysis software unhelpfully labeled as optimum grenade throwing range. One human, larger than the others and wearing what appeared to be an official uniform of some kind, pushed through the crowd. He was holding a device that amplified his voice, and when he spoke, the translator struggled for a moment before rendering it into something comprehensible. "Attention unidentified spacecraft. This is mall security. You are illegally parked in a loading zone. Please move your vehicle immediately or you will be towed." The three scientists stared at the screen in confusion. "Did he just threaten us with removal?" Quilnex asked slowly. "Not death, not imprisonment, not immediate military response." Flixen's analytical mind was struggling to process this. "Parking enforcement? I think," Grixel said, examining the crowd more closely, "they think we're here to shop." This was impossibly exactly what was happening. Humanity had been aware of extraterrestrial life for approximately 30 years, ever since the Galactic Council had made official first contact. The initial panic had lasted about a week before being replaced by a sort of resigned acceptance that was very characteristically human. Yes, aliens existed. Yes, some of them visited Earth occasionally for trade and tourism. Yes, the shopping malls had started putting up signs that said, "We accept galactic credits," right next to the ones that said, "No shirt, no shoes, no service." The crowd was growing larger. Some humans had brought out what appeared to be food items and were eating while watching. Two younger humans were holding up a banner that read, "Welcome Space Friends," with what Quilnex's analysis software identified as glitter-based adhesive decorations. "This is insane," Flixen muttered. "They're treating this like entertainment. Should we just leave?" Quilnex asked, suddenly uncertain. All his research, all his preparation, had been for scenarios involving either violent confrontation or terrified fleeing. He had no idea what to do with friendly curiosity. Before they could decide, there was a knock on the ship's hull, an actual knock, like someone knocking on a door. Grixel, acting on some instinct that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, opened the external airlock. Standing there was a human female wearing an official vest that said Mall Management. She was holding a clipboard and looking up at the ship with an expression of mild irritation that transcended species barriers. "Hi there," she said, her voice rendered perfectly clear by the translator. "Welcome to the Paramus Park Shopping Center. I'm going to need you to fill out a vendor application if you're planning to sell anything, and you'll need to move your ship to the designated spacecraft parking area. It's over by the Garden State Plaza shuttle terminal. Also, do you have proof of insurance?" The three scientists stared at her in absolute silence. "Look," she continued, checking her clipboard, "I can see you're probably not familiar with our local ordinances, so I'm going to give you a warning this time. But you really need to review the posted signs. No parking in fire lanes, no blocking emergency exits, and absolutely no landing spacecraft in handicapped spots. That's a $300 fine." Quilnex's color had shifted to confused gray. "We're not here to sell anything. We're scientists. We're here to study you." "Duln." The woman's expression didn't change. "Okay, well, if you're doing market research, you'll need to apply for a commercial research permit. That's a different form. Takes about 6 weeks to process. In the meantime, you still need to move your ship." "But we're aliens," Grixel squeaked. "From space. Doesn't that concern you?" "Honey," the woman said with the patience of someone who had worked in customer service for 2 decades, "I had to break up a fight between a Kree-Blaxian and a Floopsnoot last week over the last parking spot during the Black Friday sale. You three look downright reasonable. Now, are you going to move your ship, or do I need to call Vinny with the tow truck? Quillnex moved the ship. They parked in the designated Alternative Transportation Zone, which was located between the employee parking and a structure labeled dumpsters. The area had clearly been hastily repainted, and someone had put up a handwritten sign that said, "Spacecraft only, violators will be vaporized," with a smiley face drawn next to it. "So," Flixen said slowly, watching as the crowd dispersed with what appeared to be mild disappointment that nothing more exciting had happened. "This is how humans react to unexpected alien visitors, administrative procedure and parking regulations. They've weaponized bureaucracy," Quillnex breathed, his color shifting to something that might have been awe or horror. "They've turned paperwork into a defensive strategy. It's brilliant." "It's terrifying is what it is," Flixen corrected. "What kind of species responds to potential threats with forms?" Grixel was studying the humans more closely through the cameras. "I think," he said slowly, "we might have misunderstood something fundamental about Deathworlders. Look at how they're acting. They're not afraid of us. They're bored by us. We're just another weird thing that happened on a Tuesday." He was right. The humans were already returning to their previous activities. The mall security guard was back to monitoring the parking lot. The manager had moved on to dealing with what appeared to be a dispute over a shopping cart. Life continued exactly as it had before their arrival. "We need to observe them more closely," Quillnex decided, his scientific curiosity overriding his survival instincts. "We need to understand why they're like this. We came all this way, we might as well collect actual data." "How exactly do you propose we do that?" Flixen demanded. "We can't just walk into their commercial district. We look nothing like them." Grixel held up a device that looked like a belt made of lights. "Actually, about that. I may have borrowed some experimental holographic disguise generators from the lab before we left. You know, just in case." "You stole restricted technology. Borrowed. Temporarily borrowed. For science." Quillnex's color shifted to impressed green. "Grixel, that's either going to get us fired or promoted. Possibly both. Let's try them out." The holographic disguise generators worked on a simple principle. They scanned the local population, selected an average specimen, and projected a convincing hologram around the user that matched the local appearance standards. The theory was sound. The execution was, as would become apparent very shortly, somewhat problematic. Quillnex activated his generator first. There was a shimmer, a brief sensation of wrongness, and suddenly he appeared to be a tall human male, wearing what the device's database had identified as business casual attire. He looked down at his holographic hands, flexed his holographic fingers, and turned to his companions. "How do I look?" "Like you're about to sell me insurance I don't need," Flixen admitted. "It's disturbingly convincing." Grixel activated his next. He became a shorter human with curly hair and what appeared to be a jacket covered in pins and badges. "Oh, this is fun," he exclaimed, spinning around. "I have thumbs. Look at these. Opposable." Flixen reluctantly activated her own generator. She became a human female in professional attire, complete with glasses that her actual eyes didn't need. "I hate everything about this," she announced. "These things only have 2 eyes. How do you people see?" "Extremely narrowly, from what I understand," Quillnex said. "Now let's establish some ground rules. We observe, we take notes, we do not interact unless absolutely necessary. We're here to study their natural behavior, not interfere with it. Simple reconnaissance. Nothing can possibly go wrong." This statement would later be entered into the Galactic Archives under Famous Last Words, Volume 832. They exited the ship, crossed the parking lot, and approached the entrance to what they now understood was a human commerce center. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and they stepped inside. The first thing that hit them was the noise. Humans apparently conducted commerce at a volume level that most species reserved for emergency evacuations. Music was playing from multiple directions simultaneously, creating what could only be described as auditory chaos. Human young were producing high-pitched vocalizations that the translator couldn't quite categorize as either joy or distress. Somewhere, a machine was making a repetitive beeping sound that suggested either counting or a malfunction. The second thing that hit them was the smell. Humans, it appeared, enjoyed surrounding themselves with competing scents. There was food from multiple sources, chemical fragrances from a store that seemed to sell nothing but concentrated odors, and an underlying smell that the analysis software identified as recycled air, human, with notes of desperation. The third thing that hit them was more literal. Grixel walked directly into a support column while staring at everything at once, producing a sound that attracted the attention of several nearby humans. "Sorry! Sorry!" he squeaked, his hologram flickering slightly from the impact. "New glasses! Still adjusting!" The humans smiled politely and continued on their way, which raised an interesting question. Were they naturally this tolerant, or had dealing with extraterrestrial visitors for 3 decades simply exhausted their capacity for surprise? "Let's split up," Quillnex suggested quietly. "Cover more ground, observe different behaviors. Meet back at the ship in 3 hours. Remember, blend in, take notes, don't do anything that would attract attention." In retrospect, this plan had several fundamental flaws. The primary one being that none of them had any idea how to blend in with humans, and their understanding of not attracting attention was about to be tested in spectacular fashion. Quillnex headed toward what appeared to be a food court, reasoning that observing human feeding behaviors would provide valuable insights into their psychology. He selected a seat near the center, pulled out his datapad disguised as a human tablet device, and began taking notes. Humans, he observed, consumed food in quantities that seemed excessive for their body mass. They also consumed substances that his scanner identified as actively harmful to their biology, yet they seemed to enjoy them. He watched one human ingest something called a triple bacon cheeseburger with extra everything that contained enough cholesterol to stop the hearts of 3 methodical processors. First time at the food court? Quillnex looked up to find an elderly human male sitting down across from him without invitation. This was apparently normal human behavior, because no one else seemed concerned. Yes, very much first time. Thought so. You got that look. All overwhelmed. Let me give you some advice, son. The Chinese food, skip it. The pizza, not bad, but only get it from Gino's, not from that chain place. The Mexican food? That's not Mexican food. I don't know what it is, but it's not Mexican. You want real Mexican, you got to go to that little place on Route 32. Quillnex's translator was struggling with some of the terminology, but he nodded politely. Thank you for the information. No problem. You visiting from out of town? Very out of town. Extremely out of town, actually. The old man chuckled. I hear ya. Jersey's a bit much if you're not used to it. Where you from originally? A planet orbiting a binary star system approximately 600 light-years from here, in what you would call the Cygnus constellation. There was a brief pause. The old man processed this, took a sip of his coffee, and nodded. Huh. Long drive. Traffic bad. I'm sorry, what? Traffic. Getting here. Must have been a hell of a commute. Quillnex stared at him, his holographic face frozen in confusion. You're not concerned that I'm an alien? Kid, my daughter married a guy from Connecticut. That was concerning. You seem polite, you're not bothering nobody, and you're not trying to sell me timeshare in the Andromeda Galaxy like that last guy. You're all right in my book. The old man stood up, collected his tray, and paused. Oh, one more thing. Whatever you do, don't park overnight in the lot without paying. The tow trucks here are vicious. They don't care if you're from Earth or Alpha Centauri, they'll tow your ass just the same. Welcome to Jersey. He wandered off, leaving Quillnex staring after him with his color shifting through 17 different shades of bewilderment. Meanwhile, Flixen had discovered something she found both fascinating and deeply disturbing. A store that sold nothing but small decorative objects that served no practical purpose whatsoever. The sign said knickknacks and more, and that more apparently included tiny figurines, scented candles, decorative plates you weren't supposed to eat from, and something called live, laugh, love signs that seemed to be everywhere despite having no discernible meaning. "Excuse me, are you finding everything all right?" Flixen turned to see a human female wearing a name tag that said Ashley. Her tone suggested this was a required question rather than genuine interest, which Flixen's analytical mind actually appreciated. Efficiency over authenticity. "I'm just observing," Flixen said carefully. "Well, if you need anything, just let me know. We've got a sale on ceramic owls this week. Buy 2, get 1 half off." Why would anyone need 3 ceramic owls? Ashley's smile became slightly more genuine. "Honey, that's what I ask myself every day. But people buy them. They buy so many of them. I think humans, just like having stuff, makes them feel, I don't know, secure. Like if they surround themselves with enough small, useless objects, somehow life makes more sense." This was possibly the most insightful xenoanthropological observation Flixen had heard all day, and it came from a retail worker. "That's actually quite profound," Flixen admitted. "Yeah, well, 6 years in retail will make you philosophical. Either that or homicidal, sometimes both." Ashley glanced around to make sure the manager wasn't nearby. "So, you're not really from around here, are you? And I don't mean like from out of state." Flixen froze. "What makes you say that?" "The way you're looking at everything. Like you're trying to understand why it exists instead of just accepting that it does. Dead giveaway. Also, your hologram's flickering a little bit around the edges. You might want to get that checked. You can see through the disguise. I've worked Black Friday sales for 6 years. I can see everything. I've got PTSD and enhanced perception. It's a package deal." Ashley leaned against a shelf of decorative throw pillows. "So what are you? Researcher, tourist, refugee? We get all types." "Researcher, xenobiology. I'm studying human behavior." "Oh, honey, good luck with that. We don't even understand ourselves. But hey, free advice? If you really want to understand humans, don't watch us when we're trying to act normal. Watch us when things go wrong. That's when you see what we're really like." "Why are you helping me?" Ashley shrugged. "Because retail is boring, and this is the most interesting thing that's happened all week. Also, you look terrified, and I've spent too many years in customer service to let someone be scared on my watch. Now you gonna buy something, or just keep analyzing our materialistic tendencies?" Flixen purchased a ceramic owl, mostly because she didn't know what else to do. Ashley wrapped it carefully and handed it over with a smile. "Welcome to Earth. Try not to let it break your brain." Grixel, meanwhile, had found himself in what appeared to be an entertainment arcade designed to part humans from their currency as efficiently as possible. Bright lights, loud sounds, and machines that promised prizes if you could just accomplish increasingly improbable tasks. He was mesmerized. One machine offered the chance to grab small plush toys with a mechanical claw that was clearly calibrated to fail 98% of the time. Another invited you to throw balls at targets to win larger plush toys, which raised the question of why humans wanted these soft objects so badly. A third appeared to be a game where you hit mechanical animals on the head as they emerged from holes, which seemed unnecessarily violent but was being played enthusiastically by a human child who was laughing maniacally. "You gonna play or just stand there?" Grixel turned to find a human teenager looking at him with the expression of someone who was desperately bored and hoping something interesting would happen. I don't understand the purpose of these devices," Grixel admitted. "Dude, there is no purpose. That's the point. You pump in money, you get a tiny dopamine hit. Maybe you win something useless, and then you feel slightly less empty inside for like 3 seconds. That sounds terrible?" "Welcome to capitalism, my alien friend." The teenager grinned. "Yeah, I clocked you. The way you're moving is all wrong. Too careful, like you're not used to having a skeleton on the inside. It's cool, though. I won't narc." Why is everyone here so accepting of extraterrestrials? The teenager shrugged. Because we've got bigger problems? Because after 30 years, aliens are just part of the normal weird stuff? Because honestly, at this point, if you're not actively trying to kill us or steal our water or whatever, you're doing better than half the people on this planet? Grixel found he had no response to that. Here, the teenager said, pulling out some coins. Let me show you the claw machine. It's a scam, but it's our scam, and there's something beautiful about that. For the next 20 minutes, Grixel received an education in human gaming psychology, probability manipulation, and the art of swearing creatively when the claw dropped its prize at the last second. By the end, he had won exactly nothing, but had somehow enjoyed the experience immensely. Thanks for this, he said genuinely. No problem. Hey, if you're doing research or whatever, come back on Friday nights. That's when people are really weird. You'll get way better data. 3 hours later, the 3 scientists reconvened at the ship, each carrying their observations and new acquisitions. Quillnex had a coffee cup that said, "World's Best Dad," despite not being a father or even understanding the concept properly. Flixen had her ceramic owl. Grixel had somehow acquired a stuffed animal shaped like a creature he couldn't identify, and a T-shirt that said, "I survived the Garden State Parkway." Well? Quillnex asked. Observations? They're insane, Flixen said immediately, but not in the way we expected. They're insane in this very practical way. They've taken the absolute chaos of existence and turned it into parking regulations and retail sales. They're adaptive, Grixel added, frightening adaptive. They've integrated the concept of alien life so thoroughly into their society that we're just another weird Tuesday. They're sophisticated in ways our metrics don't capture, Quillnex mused. We've been measuring the wrong things. We look at their technology, their violence, their survival capabilities. But we miss their real strength. Which is, Flixen asked. They just keep going. No matter what happens, they adjust and keep going. Alien visitors? Sure, fill out a form. Deadly planet? Build cities anyway. Inevitable entropy of the universe? Well, might as well go shopping. They sat in silence for a moment, processing this. We need to see more, Quillnex decided. This shopping center is just one small aspect of their culture. We need to observe them in different contexts. Their homes, their workplaces, their... No! Flixen's color had shifted to alarm red. We're already in violation of 32 regulations. We need to report back, file our initial findings, and let proper authorities handle further research. But we're scientists, Grixel protested. This is a unique opportunity. When else are we going to have unsupervised access to a death world? That's exactly why we should leave. Unsupervised is the problem here. Quillnex held up his hands for peace. All right, compromise. We stay one more day, just one. We'll observe them in a few more contexts, collect comprehensive data, and then we'll return and face whatever administrative consequences await us. Agreed. Flixen's color shifted through several shades of internal debate before settling on resigned beige. One day, and we are being careful. No more direct interaction, pure observation. And someone explained to me why I bought this ceramic owl. Humans like having stuff, Grixel said sagely. It makes them feel secure. I hate that I understand that. They spent the night in the ship, monitoring local broadcasts to better understand human culture. This turned out to be a terrible idea for their peace of mind. Human entertainment media, they discovered, was absolutely baffling. They watched something called a reality show, where humans competed to receive roses from another human, who would then select a mate based on criteria that seemed to change every episode. They watched a news broadcast that seamlessly transitioned from reports of natural disasters to stories about a local dog who could skateboard. They watched advertisements that tried to convince humans they needed products they absolutely did not need through emotional manipulation and catchy music. This explains so much and yet nothing, Quillnex muttered, watching a commercial where a human family seemed inexplicably happy about the type of cleaning product they used on their floors. I think we've made a fundamental error, Flixen said slowly, her analytical mind working overtime. We've been treating humans like a species that evolved normally. But look at this. They didn't evolve on an easy world where survival was assured. They evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Their psychology is shaped by constant threat. So what did they do? They normalized it, Grixel suggested. Exactly. They took the existential terror of living on a death world and just made it boring, made it routine. They turned survival into shopping. They weaponized normalcy. It's the most sophisticated defense mechanism I've ever seen. Quilnex's color shifted to excited yellow. That's why the rule exists, not because Deathworlders are aggressive or violent, though they can be. It's because they're psychologically infectious. If you spend too much time around them, you start thinking like them. You start believing that any problem can be solved if you just treat it like an inconvenient Tuesday. Is that a bad thing? Grixel asked. Both senior scientists turned to look at him. Yes, Flixen said. Yes, it's absolutely a bad thing. Our entire civilization is built on careful analysis, risk assessment, and following proper procedures. Human thinking bypasses all of that. They just do things and figure out the consequences later. But it works for them, Grixel pointed out. They're thriving. They've spread across their entire planet. They're expanding into space. They're making friends with species that should terrify them. Maybe their way isn't wrong. Maybe it's just different. That's exactly the kind of thing a human would say, Flixen muttered darkly. You're already infected. Morning came, which on Earth was announced by the sun rising with the subtlety of a fusion explosion, which technically it was. The three scientists emerged from their ship to find that someone had left a note on their hull. It was written in 3 languages, Galactic Standard, English, and something that looked like symbols but might have been cursing. Notice, your vessel is scheduled to be inspected by the Department of Interdimensional Transportation at 0900 hours. Please have all documentation ready for review. Failure to comply may result in fines, impounding, or deportation. Have a nice day. What? Quilnex's color went straight to panic white. Inspection. We don't have documentation. We're here illegally. I told you this was a bad idea. Flixen's voice had reached frequencies that could shatter glass. I told you 68 times, and did you listen? No. Okay, everyone calm down, Grixel said, though his hologram was flickering with stress. We just need to think like humans. What would a human do in this situation? Probably something stupid that somehow works out fine, Flixen snapped. Exactly. So we'll do something stupid. We'll just tell them the truth. The truth? That we illegally followed a human vessel to their homeworld in direct violation of the most important rule in galactic law. Well, maybe not the whole truth. The truth with some strategic edits. We're scientists on a research mission, which is true. We just won't mention the part about not having permission. Quilnex considered this, his color shifting between options. It's insane enough that it might actually work. Humans seem to respect bold-faced audacity. At exactly 0900 hours, a human male arrived in an official-looking vehicle. He was wearing a uniform that suggested government authority, carrying a tablet device, and had the expression of someone who had seen absolutely everything and was no longer impressed by any of it. Morning, he said, not looking up from his tablet. I'm Inspector Williams, Department of Interdimensional Transportation. You the folks in the unlicensed spacecraft. Unlicensed? Quilnex tried to sound innocent. There must be some mistake. We're scientific researchers from... Yeah, I've heard it before. Look, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've seen every excuse, every scam, every innocent misunderstanding there is. You know what I've learned? Nobody lands in a Jersey Mall parking lot by accident. That takes either incredible stupidity or incredible balls, and I haven't decided which one you 3 represent. He finally looked up from his tablet, and his eyes narrowed slightly as he examined their holograms. Nice disguises, by the way. The flickering around the edges is a dead giveaway, though. You might want to upgrade your projectors. Flixen made a small sound that might have been a whimper. Here's what's going to happen, Williams continued. I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them honestly because I have a very good bullshit detector. And if I think you're lying, this becomes a much bigger problem. Clear? They nodded. Why are you here? Scientific research, Quillneck said, which was technically true. What kind of research? Xenoanthropological behavioral observation. Translation, you're studying humans? Yes. Do you have a research permit? Not as such. Do you have any legal authorization to be on this planet? Quillnex's color shifted to sheepish yellow. We may have skipped a few procedural steps in our enthusiasm for scientific discovery. Williams sighed the sigh of a man who was not paid enough for this. All right, here's the situation. You're in violation of about 30 different interplanetary treaties. Normally, I'd be required to impound your vessel, fine you an amount that would bankrupt a small moon, and deport you with a permanent ban from Earth. But? Grixel asked hopefully. But I'm going to do something I'm definitely going to regret. You seem like decent folks who just got carried away with your research. And honestly, I appreciate the dedication to science. My daughter's in grad school right now, and I know how intense that world gets, so I'm going to give you a choice. He pulled out a thick stack of papers from his vehicle. Option 1. You fill out all the proper documentation, pay a reduced fine of only 15,000 galactic credits, and I authorize you for a temporary research permit. You can stay for 1 standard month, conduct your studies legally, and leave without any criminal record. And option 2, Flixen asked nervously. You get the hell off this planet in the next 2 hours, and we all pretend this never happened. The 3 scientists looked at each other. Quillnex's color was shifting rapidly between options. Flixen's body language screamed, "Leave now!" But Grixel was staring at the stack of papers with something that might have been determination. How long does it take to fill out the paperwork? He asked. About 3 hours if you're fast and don't make mistakes. We'll do it. What? Flixen rounded on him. Grixel, we don't have 15,000 credits, and you want to stay here for a month? Think about it. Grixel's eyes were bright with excitement behind his holographic disguise. We'd have legitimate access, real research. We could actually learn something important instead of running away. And maybe we'd understand why the rule exists. Not just because someone told us, but because we'd have real data. Quillnex was quiet for a long moment. Then his color shifted to decisive orange. The boy's right. We've already violated the rule. We might as well make it mean something. Science isn't about playing it safe. It's about learning things nobody else knows. You're both insane! But even as Flixen said it, her color was shifting to resigned acceptance. Fine. Fine. But when this all goes catastrophically wrong, I'm writing the most detailed "I told you so" report in the history of academic literature. Williams actually smiled. Welcome to Earth officially this time. Fair warning, you're going to see some weird stuff. And before you ask, yes, it's always like this. No, we don't know why. And yes, we've just accepted it at this point. Now let's start with Form 22-A-6-9. It's the basic species information disclosure. The next 3 hours were a crash course in human bureaucracy, which turned out to be even more complex than Galactic Council regulations, and somehow less logical. They learned that Earth had 17 different governing bodies that all claimed jurisdiction over extraterrestrial visitors, none of whom agreed on anything, and all of whom required separate forms. Williams guided them through each document with the patience of a saint and the cynicism of someone who had given up on the system making sense years ago. And this one is the environmental impact assessment, he explained, pointing to a form that was 12 pages long. Just estimate whether your presence will significantly affect local wildlife. How would we affect wildlife? Quillnex asked, confused. I don't know, but someone decided we needed a form for it, so here we are. Just put minimal impact and move on. By noon, they had completed the paperwork, transferred the necessary credits, and received official documentation that authorized their stay. Williams handed them a folder thick with instructions, regulations, and guidelines. This covers everything you need to know: where you can go, what you can observe, who to contact if you get in trouble. Read it carefully. And here, he added, handing them a business card, my direct number. If anything goes wrong, anything, you call me first. I'd rather deal with it quietly than have it turn into an interplanetary incident. Why are you helping us? Flixon asked, genuinely curious. Williams shrugged. Because 10 years ago, I was a cop who thought he'd seen everything. Then first contact happened, and suddenly everything I knew about the universe was wrong. I had to relearn how to do my job, how to interact with beings I'd never imagined existed. You know who helped me? An anthropologist from the Harmonious Collective took the time to explain their culture, their laws, their way of thinking, made the transition possible. So yeah, I help researchers when I can. Universe is big and weird, and we're all just trying to figure it out together. He got back in his vehicle, then paused and leaned out the window. Oh, and one more thing. You're probably going to want to experience human food at some point. When you do, start small. Our cuisine is intense, especially the spices. More than one alien species has ended up in the hospital because they tried hot wings on their first day. He drove off, leaving the 3 scientists standing in the parking lot with their official documentation and a growing sense that they had just made either the best or worst decision of their lives. Well, Quilneck said, his color shifting to optimistic yellow, we're legal now. We have a month. Let's make it count. Where should we start? Grixel pulled out the informational folder and began reading. According to this, there are observation protocols for different environments: residential areas, commercial districts, educational institutions, recreational facilities, and... He paused, his whiskers twitching with curiosity. Something called a Department of Motor Vehicles. It says here that observing human behavior at this location can provide insights into stress responses, patience, and the concept of bureaucratic hell. That sounds ominous, Flixon noted. It does, doesn't it? Grixel's holographic face broke into a grin. Let's go there first. The Department of Motor Vehicles was located in a building that looked like someone had designed it specifically to crush the human spirit. Grey walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed with malevolent energy, rows of plastic chairs that were scientifically engineered to be uncomfortable, and a numbering system that seemed to operate on principles that violated basic mathematics. The 3 scientists entered disguised as humans and took their place in line. Within minutes they understood why this place had been flagged in the documentation as culturally significant. A human male in front of them had been waiting for 2 hours to renew his vehicle operation license. He was not visibly angry, but his eyes had taken on a quality that suggested his soul had left his body around the 90-minute mark and was watching from a safe distance. Is it always like this? Quilnex whispered to a human female sitting nearby. She laughed, but it was the laugh of someone who had lost all hope. This is a good day. Last week I was here for 5 hours because their computer system went down. 5 hours. I brought a book, I finished it, started questioning my life choices, contemplated the nature of existence. Then they called my number and told me I was in the wrong line. Why do you tolerate this? Flixon asked, genuinely baffled. Because we need licenses to drive, and this is the only place that issues them. So we wait. We all wait. Together. It's a bonding experience, a shared trauma. There's something almost beautiful about it in a horrible, dystopian sort of way. They watched as humans came and went, each one displaying remarkable patience in the face of bureaucratic inefficiency. Arguments were minimal. Violence was non-existent. Instead, there was this collective resignation, this acceptance that this was simply how things were and would always be. They're being domesticated by their own systems, Quillnex observed quietly. They've created institutions that test their patience and then trained themselves to endure them. It's brilliant, Grixel said. Don't you see? This is practice. They're practicing dealing with situations they can't control. By the time they face real adversity, they've already developed coping mechanisms. Or, Flixen countered, they've been beaten down by meaningless bureaucracy until they just accept suffering as normal. That's not resilience. That's learned helplessness. Then why aren't they rioting? Why aren't they tearing this place apart? Because, said the human woman who had been listening to their entire conversation with increasing amusement, that would mean coming back here to deal with the consequences. And nobody wants that. We choose our battles. This ain't one of them. She stood up as her number was finally called. Good luck with whatever weird alien social experiment you're running. And honey, she added, looking directly at Flixen, your hologram's glitching again. You got like 17 extra eyes showing through. Might want to fix that. She walked away, leaving the three scientists frozen in panic. She knew, Flixen hissed. They all know. We're terrible at this. Actually, Quillnex said slowly, looking around the room, I think they know and they don't care. Look at them. No one's panicking. No one's calling security. They're just continuing with their business. We're weird, but we're not the weirdest thing they've dealt with today. He was right. The humans in the DMV had collectively decided that disguised aliens were less concerning than the 2-hour wait time. They left the DMV with a profound new understanding of human psychology and 3 different forms that no one could explain the purpose of, but everyone insisted they needed. Over the next 2 weeks, they systematically observed humans in various contexts. They visited a human educational institution where young humans were taught information they would mostly forget within months. They observed a fitness center where humans deliberately exhausted themselves on machines designed to go nowhere. They attended a homeowners association meeting that devolved into a 40-minute argument about the acceptable shade of beige for exterior paint. Each experience added layers to their understanding. Humans weren't just surviving their death world, they were creating new challenges for themselves, as if the planet's natural hazards weren't enough. They invented social hierarchies, arbitrary rules, and complex rituals around the simplest activities. But they also observed moments of unexpected beauty, a human stopping their vehicle to help another human change a tire in the rain, a group of humans organizing to deliver food to elderly neighbors, a human spending 3 hours helping a lost alien tourist find their way to the correct shuttle terminal simply because helping felt right. They're contradictory, Quillnex noted in his research log. They'll argue for hours about paint colors, but unite instantly against real threats. They complain constantly about their society, but defend it fiercely to outsiders. They're simultaneously cynical and idealistic, selfish and altruistic, chaotic and ordered. They're a mess of contradictions that somehow functions as a coherent civilization. It was during the 3rd week that they made the discovery that would change everything. They were exploring a residential neighborhood, observing what humans called suburban life, when Grixel's scanner detected something unusual, an energy signature that didn't match any known human technology. Over there, he whispered, pointing to a house that looked identical to every other house on the street. Something's generating a low-level field distortion. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. They approached cautiously, their scientific curiosity overriding their common sense once again. The house appeared empty. Grixel's scanner indicated the signature was coming from the basement. We should not break into a human dwelling, Flixen said firmly. That's probably illegal in multiple jurisdictions. We're just looking, Grixel argued. Pure observation. We won't touch anything. That's what you said about the shopping mall. But Quillnex was already examining the basement window. It's open. Just a small gap. We could slip in, take a quick scan, and leave before anyone notices. They were inside within minutes, which said troubling things about human home security. The basement was cluttered with typical human storage items, boxes labeled holiday decorations, furniture that was broken but not broken enough to throw away, and several pieces of exercise equipment that looked like they'd been used exactly twice. In the center of the room, partially hidden behind some boxes, was a device. It was definitely not human technology. The design was elegant, efficient, and completely at odds with the cluttered chaos surrounding it. Quillnex recognized the style immediately. "That's Meridian construction," he breathed. "High civilization tech. What's it doing in a random human basement?" The Meridians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, part of what younger races called the high civilizations. They rarely interacted with newer species, preferring to observe from a distance. The idea that they had technology just sitting in a human home was... "It's a monitoring station," Flixen said, her analytical mind cutting through the confusion. "It's been here for a long time, decades maybe. Someone's been watching the humans long before official first contact. But why?" Grixel wondered. "And why here? This is just a normal suburb in a normal town on a normal—" "There's nothing normal about Earth," Quillnex interrupted. "We know that now. The question is, what were they looking for?" They scanned the device thoroughly, downloading its logs without touching the actual hardware. What they found made them realize that everything they thought they knew about human-galactic relations was incomplete. The Meridians had been monitoring Earth for over 300 years, long before humanity had achieved spaceflight. Long before they'd even developed radio technology. The logs were extensive, detailed, and deeply concerning. They documented human wars, human peace, human suffering, and human resilience. They tracked technological development, social evolution, and cultural changes. But more than that, they contained analysis, predictions, warnings. One entry, dated approximately 60 years ago, simply read, "Recommendation, maintain quarantine. Species shows concerning potential for rapid adaptation. Cultural infection risk, high." "Cultural infection," Flixen read slowly. "That's what we hypothesized. But they knew what humans could do to other species' psychology." Another entry, more recent. "Species has achieved orbital capability. First contact now inevitable. Recommended protocol. Limited engagement. Minimize cultural exchange. Enforce Rule 32,614 at all costs." They created the rule, Quillnex realized. The Meridians created it specifically because of what they learned about humans. It's not just policy, it's a containment strategy. "But contained from what?" Grixel asked. "Humans aren't conquering the galaxy. They're running shopping malls and arguing about paint colors." Flixen was reading further into the logs, her color shifting from curious to alarmed to something that might have been horror or fascination. "It's not about conquest. It's about influence. Look at this analysis. Every species that has had significant cultural exchange with humans has changed. They become more risk-tolerant, more innovative, more willing to challenge established protocols. The Meridians call it solution-oriented thinking disorder. They consider it a contagion." "That's insane!" Grixel protested. "Learning from other species is good. That's the whole point of the Galactic Council." "Is it, though?" Quillnex said quietly. "The Council has maintained stable, peaceful civilization for thousands of years by following careful protocols and established procedures. What happens if humans introduce chaos into that system? What happens if every species starts thinking like Deathworlders, starts believing that any problem can be solved if you just try hard enough and don't overthink it? You get change," Flixen said. "Rapid, unpredictable change. And for species that have spent millennia perfecting their stable societies, change is terrifying." They sat in silence for a moment, processing the implications. Then, from upstairs, they heard a door open. "Oh shit!" Grixel squeaked. "Someone's home!" They scrambled for the window, their holograms flickering with panic. Flixen made it through first, followed by Quillnex. Grixel was halfway out when his belt caught on the window frame. He struggled, his disguise failing completely, revealing his actual ferret-like form. "Come on!" Quillnex hissed, pulling him through just as footsteps began descending the basement stairs. They ran 3 blocks before stopping, gasping for air that their alien lungs weren't designed to process efficiently. Grixel's hologram was completely offline, and he stood there in his actual form, looking like a very confused space ferret in a lab coat. "Did they see us?" Flixen demanded. "I don't think so," Grixel said, frantically trying to reboot his hologram generator. "Maybe, probably." "We have bigger problems," Quillnex said, his color shifting to worried purple. "We just discovered that there's been a conspiracy to manipulate human galactic relations for centuries. The Meridians have been controlling the narrative, setting policies based on their own fears. The rule isn't about protecting US from humans. It's about protecting their power structure from human influence. What do we do with this information?" Flixen asked. "We can't just go public. We obtained it through breaking and entering. It's inadmissible as evidence." "Then we need more evidence," Quillnex decided. "We need to find other monitoring stations. We need to document the Meridian's surveillance network. We need to prove that the Council's policies toward humans are based on manipulation rather than genuine risk assessment." "That's going to take time," Grixel pointed out. "We've only got 1 more week on our permit." "Then we'd better work fast." And over the next 6 days, they located 12 more Meridian monitoring stations scattered across the region. Some were in basements, some were in abandoned buildings. One was hidden inside what appeared to be a very old tree that turned out to be an extremely sophisticated piece of camouflage technology. Each station contained logs, analysis, and increasingly panicked assessments of human cultural impact. The most recent entries, dating from just months ago, were particularly revealing. The species continues to exceed projections. Cultural adaptability rating, extreme. Psychological resilience, anomalous. Capacity for accepting the absurd, unprecedented. Recommend maintaining current restrictions. Possible escalation to Class Omega containment protocols if human influence spreads beyond current parameters. Class Omega, Flixen read. That's complete isolation. They want to cut humanity off from the rest of the galaxy entirely. "Can they do that?" Grixel asked. "The Meridians have enormous influence in the Council," Quillnex explained. "If they present a convincing enough case, they could absolutely push through isolation protocols. And with 300 years of data supporting their position, they have a convincing case." "Except their data is based on fear, not facts," Grixel protested. "Yes, humans change other species' thinking. That's called cultural exchange. That's normal." "Not at the scale and speed humans do it," Flixen said reluctantly. "I hate to admit it, but the Meridians have a point. We've been here less than a month, and I already catch myself thinking like a human. Just try it and see what happens. Rules are more like guidelines. It'll probably be fine. That's not how I normally think." "Is that bad, though?" Grixel pressed. "You've also become more adventurous, more willing to take risks for knowledge, more engaged with the universe instead of just analyzing it from a distance." "That's exactly what the Meridians are afraid of," Quillnex said slowly. "They've built their civilization on careful observation and controlled progress. Human thinking bypasses all that. It's fast, it's messy, it's often wrong, but it's also incredibly dynamic. And for a species that values stability above all else, that's an existential threat." Their permit was set to expire in 2 days when they received an unexpected visitor at their ship. It was Inspector Williams, and he looked concerned. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Someone reported suspicious alien activity near residential areas, breaking and entering, unauthorized scanning, potential espionage. My bosses are asking questions I don't have good answers for." Quillnex's color went straight to guilty gray. "We can explain." "I'm sure you can, but here's the thing. I've been doing some research of my own. You three aren't the first scientists to come here and start poking around in places you shouldn't. Over the past 30 years, we've had approximately 200 research missions that turned out to be looking for something specific. They all had one thing in common. They were following up on rumors about surveillance. He pulled out a tablet and showed them a map. Dozens of points were marked across the city, spreading out across the region, the continent, the entire planet. These are all the locations where we've found unauthorized technology over the years. Monitoring devices, scanner networks. Some of them are centuries old. Someone's been watching us for a very long time, and they've been really good at hiding it. Until recently. What changed recently? Flixen asked. We did. Humans did. We started developing our own scanning technology, advanced enough to detect their equipment. We started asking questions, and suddenly all these research missions started showing up, all investigating the same things you are. Williams leaned against their ship. So here's what I think is happening. Someone powerful doesn't want us knowing we've been monitored. Someone wants to maintain the status quo. And you three stumbled into something much bigger than a simple research project. The Meridians, Quillneck said. They're trying to contain humanity based on 300 years of surveillance data. They're afraid of what human culture could do to galactic civilization. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, he finally said. We figured that out about 6 months ago. Our intelligence services aren't stupid, and we've had 30 years to learn galactic politics. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can we do? Flixen asked. We're just 3 scientists. We have data, but we obtained it illegally. We have evidence, but no one will listen to us. Maybe, Williams said slowly, you're asking the wrong question. You're thinking like galactic citizens, worried about regulations and proper channels. Think like a human for a second. What would we do in this situation? Grixel's whiskers twitched as understanding dawned. You'd just release the information. Publicly. All of it. Let everyone see what's been hidden and let them decide what to do about it. That would cause a massive diplomatic incident. Flixen protested. It would violate 17 different treaties. It would be effective, Quillnex interrupted, his color shifting to determined orange. And isn't that the point? We came here to learn about humans. Well, I've learned that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. Sometimes you have to choose between following rules and following your conscience. William smiled. There's hope for you yet. Look, I can't officially condone what you're planning, but I can tell you that Earth has its own galactic communication networks, and we've become very good at information distribution. If certain data were to become public through, say, an anonymous leak to a human news organization, well, we couldn't stop that, could we? You'd help us? Quillnex asked, surprised. Kid, my job is to protect Earth's interests, and it's in our interest that the truth comes out. The Meridians have been playing puppet master with galactic policy toward humanity for 3 centuries. That needs to end, not just for our sake, but for every species that deserves to make informed decisions instead of being manipulated by fear. Over the next 24 hours, they prepared their data dump. Every log from every monitoring station. Analysis of the Meridian's influence on Council policy, documentation of how the surveillance network had been hidden and maintained, projections of what Class Omega containment would mean for humanity. They sent it all to a human journalist who specialized in extraterrestrial affairs, with copies to 3 different news organizations, 2 academic institutions, and 1 blogger who had a surprisingly large following among young galactics interested in human culture. The story broke at midnight, Earth time. By morning it had spread across the galactic communication network like a wildfire in dry brush. By afternoon, the Galactic Council had called an emergency session. By evening, the Meridian representative had resigned in disgrace. The three scientists watched the chaos unfold from their ship, which they had moved to a more secure location at Williams's suggestion. "We did it," Grixel said, sounding slightly dazed. "We actually did it. We broke the biggest cover-up in modern galactic history. We also destroyed our careers," Flixen added, though she didn't sound as upset about it as Quillnex would have expected. "We'll never work in legitimate research again." "Maybe," Quillnex said. "Or maybe we just redefined what legitimate research means. We followed the evidence wherever it led, even when it meant breaking rules. Isn't that what science is supposed to be about?" Their communicators all chimed simultaneously. "It was a message from the Galactic Council's Science Division." Quillnex opened it with trepidation, expecting arrest warrants or deportation orders. Instead, it was a job offer. "The Council recognizes the valuable service you have provided in exposing institutional corruption and manipulation of policy. While your methods were unorthodox and violated numerous regulations, your findings have proven essential for ensuring transparent governance. Therefore, the Council offers you positions as official human galactic cultural liaisons, with full authority to conduct research and make policy recommendations. Also, all fines and violations have been waived. Please respond within 3 standard days." They stared at the message in stunned silence. "They're rewarding us for breaking the law," Flixen said slowly. "No," Quillnex corrected. "They're rewarding us for solving a problem that nobody else wanted to acknowledge existed. That's very human thinking, actually. Results matter more than methods." "So what do we do?" Grixel asked. "Accept? Decline? Run away and change our names?" Quillnex looked at his companions. These two beings who had followed him on what should have been a career-ending disaster, but had somehow turned into the most significant discovery of their lives. Flixen, who had gone from terrified analyst to bold investigator. Grixel, who had maintained his enthusiasm and curiosity even when everything was falling apart. They had all changed, been infected with that peculiarly human approach to life that treated impossible problems as merely inconvenient puzzles. "We accept," he decided, "and we do the job properly. We help other species understand humans, really understand them, not just fear them. We facilitate genuine cultural exchange instead of controlled isolation. We make sure what happened with the Meridians never happens again." "That's going to be complicated," Flixen warned. "Humans are really complicated." "Yes," Quillnex agreed. "Yes, they are. But you know what? I think complicated is better than simple. Simple is stable but stagnant. Complicated is messy but alive. And after a month on Earth, I've learned that alive and messy beats stable and dead every single time." They sent their acceptance to the Council and spent their last evening on Earth, watching the sunset from the roof of their ship. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, colors that would have been invisible to their natural vision, but were rendered beautiful through their holographic eyes. "Can I ask something?" Grixel said quietly. "The rule, the one we broke. Never follow Deathworlders home. Do you understand now why it exists?" Quillnex considered this carefully. "Yes and no. I understand the Meridian's reasoning. Humans are infectious, psychologically speaking. They do change how other species think. But I think the rule was based on the wrong assumption. The Meridians thought that was dangerous. What if it's actually exactly what the galaxy needs?" "A healthy dose of chaos," Flixen suggested. "A healthy dose of possibility," Quillnex corrected. "For thousands of years, galactic civilization has been stable because everyone followed the same careful conservative approaches. But stable doesn't mean good. It just means nothing changes. Humans remind us that change is possible, that problems can be solved in new ways, that the universe is still full of surprises if you're brave enough to look for them." "So the rule should be," Grixel prompted. "Maybe," Quillnex said slowly. "The rule should be, always follow Deathworlders home. But be prepared to have your entire worldview challenged, your assumptions questioned, and your life complicated in ways you never imagined. Also, bring insurance, because humans are really weird about that. They laughed, which was interesting because laughter was something they'd learned from humans, this strange vocalization that expressed joy and absurdity simultaneously. The next morning, they prepared for departure. Inspector Williams came to see them off, along with a small crowd of humans who had heard about their story and wanted to say goodbye. Among them was Ashley from the knick-knack store, the teenager from the arcade, the old man from the food court, and the woman from the DMV. "You figured it out, then," Ashley said, handing Quillnex a small package. "What makes us tick?" "I think," Quillnex replied carefully, "I figured out that you can't be figured out. That's your strength. You're unpredictable in the best possible way. That's probably the nicest way anyone's ever called us insane," the teenager grinned. "Come back and visit sometime. Bring your weird alien friends. We'll show you the really weird parts of human culture." "What's in the package?" Grixel asked. "Open it when you're back in space," Ashley said. "Consider it a reminder of what you learned here." They boarded their ship, filed their departure documentation properly this time, and launched without incident. Once they were safely in orbit, Quillnex opened Ashley's package. Inside was a small ceramic owl, identical to the one Flixen had purchased. Attached was a note in handwriting that suggested someone had learned English as a second language from coffee-deprived grad students. "Humans like having stuff. It makes us feel secure in an insecure universe. Also, it reminds us that sometimes things don't need a purpose to have value. Welcome to the club. You're infected now. Sorry, not sorry. Love, Earth." Quillnex placed the owl carefully on the ship's control panel next to Flixen's original ceramic owl, creating a small shrine to absurdity and acceptance. As they set course for the Galactic Council headquarters, ready to begin their new roles as cultural liaisons, Flixen asked the question that had been bothering her since they'd accepted the job offer. "Do you think we can actually do this? Bridge the gap between human thinking and the rest of the galaxy? Make it work?" "Honestly," Quillnex said, his color shifting to something that might have been optimistic yellow or might have been mildly terrified white, "I have absolutely no idea. But I think that's the most human answer I could give. We'll try it and see what happens. It'll probably be fine." Grixel laughed at that, and even Flixen's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. They had broken the most important rule in galactic law, discovered a conspiracy centuries in the making, destroyed their careers, and then accidentally got them back even better than before, and somehow made friends with a species that lived on a planet actively trying to kill them. They had learned that rules were sometimes wrong, that chaos could be productive, and that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe wasn't death or danger, but the possibility that everything you believed about how things should work might be completely arbitrary. In 3 weeks, they would present their findings to the full Galactic Council. In 3 months, they would help draft new protocols for human galactic cultural exchange. In 3 years, they would be teaching courses on Deathworlder psychology at the most prestigious academic institutions in known space. But right now, in this moment, they were just 3 scientists who had followed their curiosity too far, learned too much, changed too completely, and discovered that sometimes breaking the rules was the only way to find out why the rules existed in the first place. Behind them, Earth continued spinning, its blue and green surface hiding shopping malls and DMV offices and arcade games and ceramic owls. All the beautiful absurdity of a species that had looked at the most hostile environment imaginable and decided to open a Starbucks there. And somewhere in the harmonious collective, someone was updating Rule 32,614. The new version would read, "Caution advised when engaging with Deathworlder species, particularly humans. Cultural influence may result in paradigm shifts, increased risk tolerance, and spontaneous questioning of established protocols. Approach with open mind and low expectations. Results may vary. Insurance recommended."